Greetings. Today's talk has three focal points. The first we cover is the combination of Robert Bosch and Daimler is generating a situation where Cummins Engine gets squeezed out of the business as there's a transition in electric from diesel engines to electric motors. So we take a look at that today. The second thing we look at is that Tesla has now entered the truck carrier manufacturer business, and they've also purchased a couple of trucking companies, we don't know the names of them yet, in order to help facilitate the shipment of cars to customers and primarily to keep their inventory sort of on the road rather than stuck on the ground at any facility. We then follow on with our final note on why it is that Daimler is really concentrating on the Los Angeles drayage market with some interesting information shared by our viewer. So I look forward to covering that as well. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. And also wanted to thank all of our Patreon supporters. We have a couple of new ones. All of your support is greatly appreciated and wanted to welcome you back to our channel. Today's talk has kind of an initial dialogue focused on what's going on in the electric car business or the electric motor business. As we were doing research for our last show, it popped up the fact that the Freightliner division of Daimler-Benz in the United States has two primary manufacturers of engines. Those are Detroit Diesel, a wholly owned subsidiary that we learned of Freightliner, or Daimler-Benz, which is basically a sister company, and Cummins Engine Corporation. So the issue that popped up was, as we make a transition from diesel-based trucks into the world of electric trucks, what happens at that point? Does Detroit Diesel go into a bad situation, or does Cummins go into a bad situation, or how does it all play out? And after doing some research, what we learned is that in 2011 or 2012, Robert Bosch did a deal with Daimler where they've begun jointly manufacturing electric motors. So basically, for the Daimler cars and subsequently trucks, as we enter the electric world, Daimler already has a full-on partner in ownership and development of these types of motors. And because we're switching from engine to motors, we have a lot smaller entities that we're working with. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for sort of vertically integrated companies to survive because the cost of the motors is a lot lower and it's a lot harder to differentiate yourself from competing products. So the net of this is that it's our belief that Cummins in the electric world will become irrelevant rather quickly. The one exception in the case of Cummins is the fact that there are a lot of other ways in which engines are used, that they operate successfully. And then they've also done an acquisition that moves them into electric buses and gives them more solutions in the electric world. I can't say if they have a strong presence in electric motors, but again, at least in the case of Tesla, Tesla's building its own electric motors, so there'll be no acquisition or purchases from Cummins because Tesla really has some clear ideas of what they want to do on motors, which may or may not fall in line with what everybody else is considering, including Cummins. I frankly really think that as we see Tesla get into, in the 2020 zone, 2021, 50 to 100,000 trucks a year, we're going to start seeing the folks at Cummins really be forced into some kind of strategic partnership or selling themselves or buying others in order to vertically integrate their way into a greater sales count than they'll have simply selling motors where possible as an electric solution in an electric truck world, if you will. I thought it was interesting that the CEO of Tesla came back to announce that, the CEO of Cummins came back and said electric trucks won't be a real factor for another 10 years, so the degree of worry for companies like Cummins might be limited. This seems to be in contrast to what was suggested by Elon Musk, who indicated that in 2021 Tesla would sell 100,000 of the sort of 80,000 pound vehicles, and clearly there's a disagreement between the two CEOs on where we're going, and it's hard to say that Elon Musk is wrong because he's been right so many times, and he actually has a look at the order book of companies that have already committed capital to Tesla and are planning to do major sales as we move forward. So I think this is a fascinating situation going on, but to be honest with you, it looks like Robert Bosch is the real winner here, because with Daimler controlling 40% of the global truck market as we move to electric, if they're able to maintain anything like their current market share, Bosch will go from what I think is fairly small amounts of truck engines out there to a nice business in electric motors that they'll share with the folks at Daimler-Benz. The next thing we wanted to cover is the fact that Daimler-Benz, we've covered already the fact that Daimler is elected to place their entire, I believe, 24 truck fleet of both Class 7 and Class 8 vehicles in what's called the Port of Los Angeles. Now, this is an interesting development because there are many ports they could have gone to. Freightliner's headquarters are based in Portland, so we thought they might have chosen a port nearby so they could monitor and address any issues that the trucks might have had. But as we want to report, thanks to the help of one of our viewers named Cindy, she pointed out that the Port of Los Angeles is offering a $100,000 sort of grant to trucking firms that are transitioning from traditional diesel into certified natural gas or electric. So this sort of gets back to one of our arguments that it's a great market to enter with electric when we're dealing with the port facilities, because they have monopolies and able to charge more, and they're able to move organizations towards initiatives they're focused on. In this case, the focus on the transition to less polluting trucks, and with things like a $100,000 grant on a $125,000 truck, they can now afford to pay $200K for an electric vehicle from Tesla, and it's not a big deal. As we'll review, Daimler is actually giving away the first group of trucks as prototypes, and are able to do that with the large number of vehicles that they're selling around the world and the profits from that. So very interesting situation, definitely worth noting and keeping an eye on. The next thing that we wanted to cover is the fact that Tesla has actually went ahead to try to solve its trucking needs. They've made a couple of moves. There's a claim by Elon Musk. We couldn't find any confirmation. They've actually purchased a couple of trucking companies because there's a shortage of both trucks and truckers. And so by purchasing a company, Tesla can guarantee that they'll be able to move vehicles as needed to all their service facilities to meet their production and sales targets. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's I lived in California for many years, and there was a company there that had a business focused on sort of healthy salads. And when you walk into the restaurant, they actually had a salad bar that was fairly extensive. And what was interesting about the salad bar is they specifically made sure that when they were in malls, the line to get into the salad bar would extend into the mall. So in essence, the mall started paying part of the rent that that the restaurant had to pay. And by extending that line into the mall, they in essence cut down the number of seats that they had to have, or space they had to have for the line, and therefore increased their revenue because they had more seats for for people to sit down at when they're inside the restaurant. I bring this up because in the case of Tesla, it seems that part of Elon Musk's strategy is minimizing the amount of real estate that Tesla controls. And one of those ways to do it is to have a constant stream of trucks arriving, cars being sold, and then you don't have large parking lots full of cars, as might be the case at other automobile retailers. It seems to be a strategy that's kind of working, but kind of not. In the heavy push to get vehicles out right now, we visited some parking lots where Tesla's been forced to actually rent a second lot because the paperwork needed to have owners pick up their vehicles is taking longer than expected. And so now you have sort of a logjam. So yes, you can store cars on top of trucks and, sell immediately or sell in 5 minutes if you have the paperwork process together, but it can also be a complete disaster because now you have to find temporary places to store vehicles, and temporary versus long-term vehicle storage can actually be very expensive. So we'll keep an eye on this for you and update you, but Tesla's the type of company that tends not to make big changes until there's some kind of crisis that forces it. So I hope that a crisis doesn't have to pop up before sort of an efficient strategy on real estate management comes into place. The next thing that we wanted to sort of take a quick look at is that we have a conversation going with a viewer who was discussing the fact that there's actually an example in their case where the repair people from Tesla have to drive 3 hours to and from the service facility to service their Model 3. He explained that if there's no need for a lift, Tesla prefers to actually drive to the customer, repair the vehicle, and then return home. And the dialogue we were having is the fact that if possible, minimizing the distance the Tesla mechanic has to drive will really help the company despite the conversation that says otherwise, because the cost related to repair of that vehicle has to include the drive time of the mechanic. And so hopefully Tesla realizes that if you have mechanics within a building, if you have 3 people that are wasting time driving around, for 1 or 2 days a week, that's enough wasted time to actually pay the rent on an industrial space and just have them walking between cars as they do these repairs. So, it is a great thing for customers for having door-to-door service, but it's kind of like why they got rid of doctors coming door-to-door. That's a very expensive, well-trained person, and having them driving around for 3 hours each way without doing any work, I don't think it's a great situation for anyone involved. The final note that we wanted to sort of dive into is sort of watching the movements of Tesla's stock price along with the stock market. As you saw yesterday, the stock was up almost, I believe, $30 for a while, and now it's pulled back again. The markets are actually very volatile right now, but as we have real earnings to hang a hat on, as well as number of units sold, I really think that Tesla's stock price will stabilize in a fairly positive arena because they've pushed very hard to get as many vehicles sold as possible. The final note that we wanted to sort of dive into is sort of new developments at the Gigafactory that we didn't take the time to really focus on. As you all may recall, in October, Elon Musk announced that Tesla was 1 year early in achieving the full 35 gigawatt hours of battery production at the Gigafactory from the Panasonic partners. What was interesting about it is that he first noted that they were finished early with this. He also noted that they had now begun the process of building out the brand new automated assembly facilities when it comes to pack put together. So this is an important development because in theory, Tesla having 35 full gigawatt hours of batteries ready to go, and then by theoretically the end of January, them now having automated pack put together facilities allows Tesla to move into a situation where they can now fully get to the 10,000 a week production run, which kind of equals about 500,000 cars a year is being produced. And so if we're shipping, in theory, 150,000 to Europe, the same to the US, and the same to China, those general numbers would be a solid, sort of revenue run for the company over time. So I thought it was important to note what was going on with this facility, because it's awesome. And then the next sort of threshold is if that facility can now use the next year to target a 35 to 45 gigawatt hour sort of run rate of batteries, we now move into the possibility of now having batteries for future vehicles, including the truck, the semi-truck, the Model Y, and the Roadster. So it looks like there's a lot of elements of really good news for Tesla going on right now. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. Wanted to say happy holidays. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, lehitraot, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi, farvel, Dutch, and adios, ni hao ma. And have a great day, and thanks for joining us once again, and bye for now.